Is WVVA in Focus, a weekly program about important issues and events in the two Virginias.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this edition of In Focus. I'm your host, Melinda Zosh. This morning, we're highlighting an old theater that has come back to life in downtown Bluefield, West Virginia. You may have passed it. It's called the Granada, and after years of work and a lot of money, it's open to the public once again. And once you're inside, you'll feel like you're being transported back to the 1920s. Joining us this morning to discuss the Granada is Brian Tracy, the Executive Director of the Bluefield Arts and Revitalization Corporation. And Brian, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm happy to talk about the Granada.
Yeah, we appreciate you being here. It is a rich piece of history in downtown Bluefield, and I do want to mention that we have plenty of photos and video that we'd like to share with our viewers shortly. But first, Brian, what's the history of the Granada? When did it first open?
Well, first though, I know you have photos, but nothing tells the Granada's story better than being there in the theater.
That's true.
So I'd ask everyone to stop by, take in a movie. Eventually we'll have music, more dance recitals and so forth. So step into the Granada. The theater first opened on January 2nd, 1928. Opened with not just a movie. The movie was Rose of the Golden West, a silent film starring Mary Astor, but vaudeville acts and even a 10-piece orchestra.
Wow.
So they really did things big back in 1928.
Yeah, they did. That was so long ago. But what happened to the theater over the years? About how long was it actually up in operation before it fell into ruin, so to speak?
Well, it operated as a movie palace, and that's how it was framed back in the 20s and 30s when it was first opened, up until 1977. While we have a record, and this speaks to the history of the theater too, of the first film that I mentioned shown there, its history is silent on what the last film was shown in 1977. The theater, as many theaters did in downtown, small downtowns across the country, just sort of faded away. So it closed in 1977. And
Brian, do you know what was done in that space since that time? Was it boarded up, or what did it look like from the 70s on?
Well, I'm new to Bluefield.
Yes,
I've only lived here 60 days.
Welcome, by the way.
Thank you. But our local historians tell me that it was a nightclub for a number of years, few years, in the 1980s. Closed, fell into disrepair. Family bought the theater, really didn't operate it as a private business. And after that, then the theater was just left to decay. It was the victim of vandals. The roof hatch was open in one of those activities. Copper piping was stripped from the theater. And over the years, weather, storms, rain, I think it does snow here in Bluefield. I'll find out this winter.
You will find out, and it does snow.
But that combination over the years really did deteriorate the theater to an extensive degree. But it never suffered the same fate as Bluefield's other theaters, particularly the Colonial, which collapsed. The Granada was built to last, so it survived those years of disuse.
So Brian, tell us more about the process then to get it up and running. And as Brian mentioned, you do have to check it out for yourself. The photos, the video, it does not do it justice. When you step in there, you really feel like you're back in the 1920s. But that's not a process that happens overnight at all.
No, it didn't. And that's one of the things that really brought my wife and I here to Bluefield. We were just taken by the commitment of so many people here locally to bring this theater back. I've worked in economic and community development across the country, financing a number of projects, including other historic theaters, and I've never really seen a community come together like the folks did here in Bluefield. It took 9 years though.
Wow.
So with even that level of commitment, it takes a long time to bring one of these projects to fruition.
Yeah, and I mean, I can imagine it would take a lot of money, probably a number of grants for something like this to come together. From a fiscal point of view, how did this come together?
Yes, it always starts with civic leadership. There always has to be that that either individual corporation or foundation, or sometimes a combination of all those parties coming together to act as that catalyst to get things started. And here in Bluefield, I won't mention any names because I'd leave somebody out.
Right.
But there were so many different individuals, corporations, foundations that not only talked about bringing the Granada back to life, but they got their checkbook out and they wrote some big dollars, and that's what made this possible.
How much money are we talking about to make this happen?
Well, all in, just short of $4 million.
Wow.
And in almost all the other projects that I've financed in my previous life, there's always debt that has to be repaid. And here in Bluefield, though, the community raised all that money without ever borrowing a cent.
Now that's incredible.
It really is.
And you don't hear of that every day. A lot
No,
of
you
times you
don't.
have to borrow and get, like you said, pay that money back. But the fact that they raised that money, that's a true testament to the people who really wanted to see this theater
Yes,
come
it
back
is.
to life.
Yes, it is.
And Brian, it really has come back to life. I mean, when you step inside, you see even the carpeting, the attention to detail on the walls, the ceiling, the levels, all the way up to the top where there's tables that you can sit and I guess at some point have some food. But how does one go about even getting a theater back to its kind of like its original state like that?
Yeah, lots of research is required. So a really good architect was necessary. The folks here in Bluefield found an architect that specialized in historic renovation. Knowing what you have within the building is really the first step too. So we were fortunate here in Bluefield. I'm starting to say we, even though it's only been 60 days. I hope that's okay.
That's good.
With the local folks, because they've been very welcoming and
Yes.
very much feel part of the community. You got to know what you have.
Yeah.
So the story of the organ that I think you all are familiar with.
Yeah.
Knowing through the Bluefield Daily Telegraph, pulling articles from their archives that talked about the history of the theater, who played there over the years, the contractor, the materials that were used, all that came together. And the architect, the contractor, the boards of the organization that came together did an extensive amount of research. For example, they found a black and white photograph of the carpet, the original carpet. That's all they had.
Wow.
No samples, no originals survived. But they sent that to a specialist in historic restoration in New York. And they were able, through processes that I don't begin to understand, take that black and white photograph and figure out the colors of the carpet. And so what you see in the Granada is, we believe, is a very, very accurate reproduction of what that carpet looked like back in 1928.
Oh, talk about attention to detail and really having some skill to look at a black and white photo and say, okay,
And
here's
patience.
a reproduction.
And patience.
Right, because
To
like
get all those details correct. And when you visited the theater, it's evident.
oh my gosh. I want to encourage everyone to please go to the theater, because you can actually go there and watch a movie. We'll have more on that in just a bit. We do have to take a quick break, and we'll have more on the organ that Brian just mentioned coming up right after this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this edition of In Focus. This morning we're talking about a beautiful theater that's been restored in downtown Bluefield, West Virginia, called the Granada. Brian Tracy joins me once again. And Brian, recently one of our reporters actually got into the Granada, and he looked more into the story behind the organ there. So it's been a half century. A musical instrument has finally made its way back to Bluefield, West Virginia. And our Glenn Kittle shares the story of the Granada Theater's original organ and also its journey home.
The Granada Theater's newest addition is actually more like an old friend. This old Wurlitzer Theater organ was first installed in this theater back in 1927. A crew chief from the American Theater Organ Society says it's not your run-of-the-mill church organ.
There are ranks that are similar to what you'd have on a church instrument, but it's not quite the same. The voicing is different. And then, of course, you have what you've looked at here, the toy counter up here that has all the sound effects that they use to go with silent films. That's a little bit different component.
Between 1928 and sometime in the early 1970s, this organ was a fixture inside this theater, but an anonymous buyer in Illinois whisked it away. From there, the organ made a short stop in Huntington before returning here to the Granada. Abernathy says it's rare for organs of this age to last long enough for a homecoming like this.
It's a little unusual. It doesn't happen very often where an organ gets repatriated to its original home. In fact, this is only 2 instances I can think of here and the one in Huntington that's ever happened. And it's a piece of history. It's fun when we open some of these up and we're rebuilding some of them. You can find notes that people have penciled inside the chest, for example.
Now this old instrument has a new life ahead, starting with a facelift, by combining most of the original parts with a retrofitted computer system, allowing the aged organ to play a new tune, autonomously. The work is set for completion by spring 2022. The house manager here is excited to bring back the old and mix it with the new.
And we're getting so excited to be able to play it again, to hear it played again, and we'll be programming some events around the organ and some silent films and potentially some other, perhaps some music will be played before the movies or something like that, but we're very anxious to hear it.
Here for you in Bluefield, West Virginia, Glenn Kittle, WVVA News.
Fantastic story. Thank you so much, Glenn. And for more information on ways you can help the Piedmont chapter of the National Organ Society renovate the organ, you can head to our website. That's WVVA.com. Joining me again, Brian Tracy. And Brian, really an incredible story about the organ making a homecoming back here. So what are your thoughts on that, of it making its full circle right back here to Bluefield where it started so many decades ago?
Well, that's certainly remarkable.
Yes.
When I take it as just a propitious sign of more good things to happen with the Granada. If a theater that was long lost can somehow find its way back to its original location here in Bluefield, just think of all the other good things that the Granada has in store for us.
It's incredible. From Illinois to Huntington, back here to Bluefield, it's being restored.
Yes.
So tell our viewers more about the plan for the organ once all that work is finished on it.
Yes. Well, you saw in the report just some brief shots of all of the different musical instruments that are attached to the Wurlitzer, a bass drum, sound effects. There's even you didn't see this here because it's too big for the camera shot, but in one of the organ rooms, there's even a full-size xylophone up against the wall.
That's incredible.
As Nicole Thompson, our house manager, mentioned, we will be bringing silent movies with live music to Bluefield.
Oh, wow.
Accompanied by music and all the sound effects that go with a silent movie as it was played in the 1920s to our auditorium at the Granada. We don't have a particular film in mind yet, but we hope to have a whole series of silent films for the community starting in 2022.
Okay, maybe a Charlie Chaplin film at
Perhaps,
some point?
yes,
He's famous.
yes. Harold Lloyd is another one of my favorites. Buster Keaton is another good one.
Why do you think it's important to have something like the theater in downtown Bluefield, but you're also bringing back silent films and classics from decades ago, other movies? Why do you think it's important to have something like this available to residents in the two Virginias?
Well, it's most simply stated, it's just a lot of fun. If you've never been to a silent movie, and some people would say, well, why would I want to go to a silent movie? That's old technology.
Right.
But when my children were younger, I would take them to a film, an art house theater in Silver Spring, Maryland, that would often have silent movies with live music. And my kids were skeptical. So back then they might have been 8, 9, 12 years old. And after I took them, they were asking me, well, when can we go again?
Really?
So
wow.
It's just a fun experience, and it's not something that you can sit in your living room and stream.
No, you can't.
You don't get that big screen experience, live music, filled with other people in the auditorium laughing. In the first movie I took my son to, he had not been to a theater before. He was all of 5 years old. It was an hilarious comedy. And he looked up and said, "Is it okay to laugh, Dad?" And the answer is, you bet it's okay to laugh. So we want to bring that kind of laughter, that kind of fun back to Bluefield.
Right, and you also mentioned it's something you really can't get in your living room.
You can't get that experience.
No,
you can't recreate that
in
your living room.
And these days, I mean, people they have Hulu, Netflix, you name it,
On and on it goes.
they're watching it. But why do you think it is also important to have that experience of going to your family or your loved one, going to the theater and having that experience, which it seems to be almost like a dying experience these days?
Yeah, I think just like with live theater, live music, watching a film, a movie is the same kind of experience. It helps bring a community together. Whether it's a comedy, whether it's a drama, whether it's an important movie with a message, you don't get that communal experience when you're sitting in 10,000 living rooms across Mercer County and Tazewell County.
No.
That's not how you bring a community together, and we see the Granada as a catalyst for creating that kind of spirit, that community spirit that already exists in the two Virginias. We think that will only help to continue to build that kind of attitude.
Well, that leads me to my next question, Brian. What kind of movies can people expect to be watching at the Granada? What do you have looking ahead?
Well, we're going to start with the classics. We opened with a film noir from 1941, The Maltese Falcon, with Humphrey Bogart, Mary Astor, and a whole host of other interesting characters. We'll be showing that again next Thursday. But we will also be showing a whole host of other entertaining films. Singing in the Rain, the Gene Kelly, Debbie Reynolds musical from the early 50s, often regarded as the best of the 1950s musicals. So you'll get to see that on the big screen here. We'll be showing Casablanca with Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. We'll be showing a Grace Kelly murder mystery, Dial M for Murder. Eventually, we'll move into some newer films. We'd like to do a series of westerns as well, some familiar films. We also have animated films from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, family-friendly films on Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and Sunday afternoon as well.
Well, that's nice that you also have showings in the mornings. What time frame are we talking about, like 9, 10 a.m.?
On Saturday, we'll have a 10 o'clock matinee, and then 2 o'clock, that's Saturday, and then on Sunday, a 2 o'clock matinee.
Okay, so you have several options. If you're a morning person, get to the 10 o'clock. If you don't wake up until the afternoon, you can go over to the 2 o'clock showing. All right, Brian, we have to take one more quick break. We'll be right back after this.
Great.
Welcome back to this edition of In Focus, everyone. This morning we've been talking about the Granada Historic Theater in downtown Bluefield, West Virginia. Joining me again, Brian Tracy. Brian, we were mentioning some of the options for folks to go attend these upcoming films. They can go on the weekends, on Thursdays, but what are the ticket prices if they'd like to go?
We've purposely kept the ticket prices very affordable. So the matinees that we talked about are priced at $5 a ticket.
It's not bad.
No, and the evening tickets are $7.50.
Yeah, that's not bad at all, because you hear from a lot of people it's so expensive to go to the movies these days. Well, this is an affordable option.
Yes, and the concession prices are equally affordable. So it's the whole package. Good price on the movie tickets, plus you can come get a soft drink, popcorn, candy, and you're in and out for $20, $25.
Yeah, and the area where you can actually get the popcorn and candy, I saw that recently as well. It looks nice. It fits the theme of the theater. And Brian, there's also an area where people can go and get gelato, I understand?
Yes. Thanks you for mentioning that. This is unique to the area, I think a broad area. We have a gelato shop called Movie Scoops that is always open when we're showing a film. And
That's cool.
the gelato is, it's authentic. It's imported from Italy. Even the little plastic spoons were imported from Italy.
You hear that, kids? You can post that on Instagram. Authentic spoons from Italy. Get a picture with your gelato at the Granada. That is so
I've tasted
so cool.
most of the flavors, and it's all good.
Oh, yeah, I saw a list of the flavors, and I'll tell you what, that's on the to-do list to try out the gelato. But you can also go in there and buy some gifts for people. When I was
Yes,
there,
we
I
have
saw
a gift
that.
shop that is staffed by volunteers and with merchandise that reflects both the Granada as well as Bluefield's history. And many of the gift items are unique, as you would expect, to Bluefield. So
That's
stop
right.
by our gift shop as well as Movie Scoops for gelato.
Yeah, because in the gift shop, what I saw, there were mugs, wine glasses with the stems, so you can buy that for people. Brian touched on the history of Bluefield with lemonade and lemonade days. So there's some lemons in there. You can buy like lemon squeezers and shirts. So there's a variety of items, and preserves too. I saw that in there. So a variety of items if you're looking to maybe get started early on your Christmas shopping, you can do
There
that.
you go. Hadn't thought of that. That's
So
right.
there's an idea.
That's
You
right.
can get, if you're an early bird and you want to get that done, you can head on over there and see the gift shop
Yes.
as well. So Brian, I also want to ask you about I can't think of the exact name of it, but it's like a pulley system where you can get food up to the top.
Yes, the dumbwaiter.
The dumbwaiter, yes.
That's in the
Thank
building.
you. Can you touch on that a bit?
Yes, yes. So the building does have a catering kitchen that serves the terrace seating. And the catering kitchen is served by a dumbwaiter, which goes down to the commercial entrance. So it allows for caterers, businesses that want to hold events there, to really make efficient and effective use of the space. So it's meant to be a facility to be used for the entire community. So in addition to movies and music, I mentioned the More.
Yeah.
Well, the More will include things like dance recitals and theater, but it will also include an event space that will be available for rent for community organizations.
And what's the time frame to have the theater open for those other events like that you just touched on?
Well, we hope in December to hold a dance recital there. Certainly Christmas-themed events, perhaps some music groups coming in as well. So look for the music and more part of the movies, music and more in December.
Okay, well, definitely as we learn more, we'll update our viewers about that as well. And I also want to mention that there are seats for sale inside.
Yes,
Right, so people can
yes.
purchase those. How do they go about doing that, and how does that work exactly with someone buying a seat? What does that entail?
You're buying a seat not to sit in when you come to the
Right.
movies. It's first come, first served, general admission. But you're purchasing that seat for $500, the proceeds of which go to benefit the Granada Theater, to memorialize a loved one, or to pay tribute to a friend, another family member, or just to put your own name on the seat. Who wouldn't want to own a piece of Bluefield's history?
Yeah, right. And
And
if you are interested, we have an email address. Brian
Great.
touched on Nicole Thompson. We have her email address. I met her. She gave me a wonderful tour yesterday. So if you are interested, you can reach out to Nicole. She's provided us her email address, so you can go ahead and reach out to her if you want more information on the seats as well. And Brian, you're actually the executive director of BARC for short.
Of BARC, yes.
So can you touch on BARC and what it stands for again, and what it does?
Yes. Before we move on to BARC, just very quickly,
Yeah.
tickets are available for movies at the Granada box office, but also on our website at bluefieldgranada.com.
Okay, so we have that information for our viewers as well,
Right.
the website, and we also have a Facebook address, so you can type in Granada Theater and you can find them right on Facebook as well.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, I'm the executive director of
Yes.
BARC. BARC, B-A-R-C, is the acronym for Bluefield Arts and Revitalization Corporation. And it's the umbrella nonprofit organization that serves Greater Bluefield. In addition to managing the Granada Theater, we also manage the Bluefield Arts Center, which includes the historic auditorium, available for private rental, and we host music events there, and the Payne Gallery. So that's a little bit about BARC.
Well, interesting history there as well. And also, Brian, can you tell us a little bit more? We have a few more minutes left in the segment. Just tell us a little bit more about, you touched on what you did up in the Washington, D.C. area, but tell our viewers a little bit more about you and what you did right before coming here to Bluefield.
Great. Well, my wife and I relocated here from Silver Spring, Maryland. And my wife was a public school teacher. She's teaching now here in the Bluefield area in Tazewell County. I was an executive with a major bank. I worked in community and economic development. And the group that I was responsible for managing made loans and investments financing community-oriented projects across the country. Affordable housing, job training centers, other commercial enterprises that spurred the creation of jobs in low and moderate income areas. Charter schools was another area we financed. But we also finance, as I mentioned earlier, historic theaters across the country. including the Fox Theater in downtown Oakland, the Stanley Theater in Utica, New York, and my favorite, other than the one in Bluefield, was the Apollo Theater in Harlem, in New York City. So Bluefield has something in common with all of those historic venues now, because Bluefield's Granada Theater was financed using federal and historic state tax credits. That's an area in which the group I managed had significant expertise, and I was fortunate that I could bring that 20 years of expertise to Bluefield. So the Granada was the first project in Bluefield that was financed using this incentive program. So that helped us capitalize the theater with reserves that allow us to keep prices for concessions and tickets affordable. It also allows us the cushion to be innovative, take some chances in terms of programming. So I was very pleased that I could bring some of my expertise here to Bluefield to benefit the community.
We're happy to have you, Brian, and your family here. So if you
Great
do
to be
see
here.
Brian out and about in the community, you see him around the Granada, be sure to say hi to him and welcome him to the Bluefield community. We've run out of time. Brian, thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. That does it for this edition of In Focus. We'll see you all again next Sunday. Have a great one.